Hey everybody, we're here live with Maple Syrup on a Wednesday night. It is March 12th, which means that we're kind of steaming headlong into con season. And so on that note, we brought our special guest over here, Mr. Pat Marino, or Dr. Pat Marino, actually, to the show. And we're going to talk about some fun stuff today. But before we do that, how you doing there, Kat? What's going on?
Going well. I was hoping we were going to get a really cool sunset, but it's decided to just go grey instead.
It is Portland, so.
That's not true. We get really gorgeous sunsets here sometimes.
Yeah. But I mean, gray is also normal, so.
Yeah.
Madness. Pat, how are you?
I'm doing great. It's con season kind of already started for us. We had Gamma just happened, and then a lot of our team was at New York Toy Fair running around like crazy, and seems like we're already getting ready for the next one. So very busy.
Yeah. What is the next one for you?
One tomorrow.
For me, I'll be at, what is next? Unpub?
Yep.
No, Proto Atlanta is first.
Oh,
Proto Atlanta is first. That's coming
the
up
backyard
next
con.
Week. Yep. And then Unpub, Gathering, and then I think UK Games Expo after that.
Oh, fun. That's good.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. Cool. I'll be at Breakout this weekend in Toronto, and then we'll be doing, I think the next one is probably just it'll probably be Gathering. And then after that, I'm going to like either one of the Carolinas, I don't know, for like a retreat. And then I'll do that. And I don't know. I'm reading about all these people getting detained by ICE. So I'm not sure if that's cool or not. I don't know. You guys,
that's cool or not? It's
well, I don't know.
Not cool.
I mean, I don't know if it's cool if I go over the border. So it's like
no. I mean, so talking about what we have coming up, we have TokenCon this week. So we leave at something disgusting in the morning tomorrow.
To get to another Carolina.
Are always really early. Sorry?
Isn't that in one of the Carolinas as well? I think it's North Carolina.
No.
TokenCon is
from TokenCon.
Yeah. I'm thinking of TantrumCon, the other T-Con.
Yeah, that's fair. And then we're back to Portland for GameStorm the weekend after that. And then we've got like a week or something to catch our breath. And then it's the Gathering. And then after that, full steam for our move. So,
all the way over to, where are you moving again? Czech Republic?
Hopefully the Czech Republic. We're going through the visa process at the moment. So.
Okay, cool. Very interesting. But we've brought Pat here today to talk about everything but Sellsheets, right? So, Pat, tell us a little bit about yourself, how you got into games, how you decided, that you wanted to work professionally in games, and then we're going to talk about the topic tonight, which is what else is there other than Sellsheets that can help you pitch your game to a prospective publisher?
Sure. So I got into tabletop games, I think the way a lot of people did. I played games as a kid. I played Magic when I was younger, then had a lapse, and then folks showed me Catan and kind of flipped that switch back on immediately. Designed my first game probably 2 weeks after playing Catan for the first time. I was like, I could do this. And, did the pitching games to publishers things for a while, did a lot of like speed pitching events and, playtesting cons and things like that. And then was working in higher ed at the time, had been pitching a lot to the op, and they offered me a position to come on as a full-time game designer back in 2017. And that was an easy yes to take that job. Change careers completely and just focus on games. And since then, I've moved up a little bit. I'm now director of hobby games. So that means basically that I'm in charge of figuring out what our hobby game line should be at the op, and then shepherding that through the process of development and art direction and things, just kind of having that vision for what the product is going to be. And so, of course, to today's topic, that means a lot of my time is spent taking pitches from inventors. So kind of went from pitching to doing assigned game dev in-house, make this game within this time frame, to now sitting on the other side of the table, hearing those pitches and trying to figure out what the best games are that we're going to produce.
And judging in competitions as well, right? In contests.
Yeah, and so that's become a really effective scouting tool for me to judge both the Ion Award, which is part of SaltCon, and then the Cardboard Edison Award, both of which happen the first quarter of the year every year. each of those we get assigned anywhere from 50 to 60 games easily. Last year, I went through all of the Cardboard Edison submission videos, which was about 320 or so.
Wow.
Got through them all this year. It's just been a very busy spring for us, but not evaluating necessarily or judging all of them, but at least viewing the videos and seeing
Right.
what's out there, because if I can kick off my year having seen 500 games by April, that certainly increases the odds that I'm going to find that diamond in the rough that we want to turn into a finished product.
It also gives you an idea of what's coming, right? And who is out there in a lot of ways. Do you see
that's a great
trends?
Yeah, it is a great point. Is the more we see trends emerge. One of the things I've talked about before that comes up a lot is there'll be a hot game or couple of games within a genre, and I think it turns on a like light bulb for a lot of designers of, oh, what could I do with that? So what we've seen over the last maybe 18 months is games like The Crew came out and sort of made people think differently about trick taking. And obviously we've evolved sort of to arcs and some things like that. And a lot of inventors went down that rabbit hole of what else could we do with trick taking. The trap in that, of course, is over the last 18 months, I've probably seen a few hundred different trick taking games. And that always turns on that little like red flag of like, well, if I'm seeing this many, how many of these are getting signed by my competitors? And do we want to be one of 300 new trick-taking games next year? Or are we going to try to find the next game that's going to set the next trend that people are going to follow? So we're trying to do a little of that while also being aware of, where the interest is. And we see it with themes too. There's certainly waves of themes where it's like, wow, we've seen, 100 games about capybaras this year. Maybe that's a trend, but it also means it could be a crowded space for us to try to stand out in.
There's only so many capybara games you can make.
I think
surprised.
No, that's not true. Send all of them. Yep. Make the games.
So, Pat, what tools have you found particularly effective, forms of media or whatever, that people have been using to get their ideas across to you? So their communication tools, their media, right? But which ones do you find effective and why?
Yeah, I mean, there's the classic sell sheet, and I know there's lots of stuff out there about sell sheets and how to create them. And I think, try to get past some of that to some of the other tools that are out there now. Pitch decks have become a lot more popular. And what I like about a pitch deck is rather than trying to fit everything on one 8.5 by 11, you're basically making a slideshow, right? That is going to go through, and it almost can play out like a comic book that teaches the game. Like, do this, slide 2, do this. And I think that's a pretty accessible tool for people who maybe aren't as comfortable on camera or editing video and trying to make something that's professional in that way. But it takes you a little step past just a static one sheet. And then beyond that, obviously videos. We get a lot of pitch videos now that are included with submissions through our portal system. And for me, that's my favorite, is when I get a pitch video. When I talk about the volume of games we look at in a year, and if I've got hundreds I'm trying to evaluate, it takes me longest if all I have is a rule book, and I have to read that rule book and kind of parse out what the game is to understand if it is a fit for us or not, because that's always that first check, right? Is this an op game, or is it way off base for what we make and what we want to pursue? A video, I can get that in 2 to 3 minutes. If it's well put together, it can be very clear. And it's really easy for me to share with my team, as busy as they are as well, to be like, hey, everybody watch this. Let me know what you think if we want to get this prototype in-house. And then honestly, like social media, I think it shouldn't be overlooked, is I will have people send me posts from other designers. Like, have you seen so-and-so's working on this? Like, yeah, exactly. Sometimes it's just my brother, like, hey, I saw this over on Reddit or whatever. What do you think about that? Like, it could be a really cool game. Being out there in various channels where gamers are and not hiding somewhere with, here's my precious little design I don't want anybody to see, but putting it out there publicly, sometimes those things, even a quick TikTok or something, can make its way to publishers to evaluate and say, I think I want to reach out to this inventor and learn more. So, that's some of the things that come to mind.
The TikTok thing is a really good idea, actually. My friend Sasha, for the second year, has done his game January, where every day in January he does a little short game jam. He films it, and then he releases it on TikTok every day for that month. Out of those, so far, I think he's had something like 5 of them now have had offers on them or something out of those 2 sessions, those 2 months worth of. And it's such a good exercise. Like, it's not how I work. I'm not someone who can do the same thing for 30 days in a row, but it seems to have really unlocked something for him. And he's quite well known now as the guy who did that thing. So it's definitely like it's his thing now. I think that's a really cool way of doing that.
Mm-hmm. And so, Pat, what do you like to see in a pitch deck or a sizzle reel or whatever? What is
Should
the
we talk
key?
about what the difference of them is? Like, what are
Sure.
they for?
Yeah, I mean, so a pitch deck to me is like Pat was saying, it's almost like this, like a visual comic, because you can animate it, you can add voiceover, you can have text and picture. So for me, pitch decks are sort of the best of both worlds. They are something you can have almost total control over in terms of your pacing and your speed. And if you use them like I use them, you can they can be something you can hand over to somebody, like it's a slide deck and everything's on it, or you can present it live to the people as well. And we use pitch decks a lot in like Hollywood for pitching television and movie as well. So it's very, very much something that I've done a lot of. And so we get to show it the best with the media. I think that's really what I like to get at when I'm talking to people about how to pitch is make the most of the medium that you're using. So a pitch deck, because you have text and you have video and you have graphics and you have sound and you have all the things, make sure you're using them, which is very different than a static sell sheet, like Pat was saying. And then the sizzle reel is sort of hard for some games. Some games just don't translate well to sizzle reels because sizzle reels really are supposed to be super, super short, like 1 to 3 minutes, that are showing the thing in action and are showing like the hook of the thing in a visual way. And sometimes hobby games don't necessarily hit that way. So sizzle reels, while a lot of companies like them, like Hasbro loves sizzle reels, but Hasbro's a toy company. So that's kind of just what their inventor relations people are used to. But it is really, really hard to show the hook of a deep strategy game in a 2-minute video, 3-minute video. And really, even in a 10-minute video, you probably still can't show it because it's not something that's really visual. And so there's been a movement lately, in the industry and amongst designers to like get things off the table, that kind of presence that we're talking about when we talk about table presence, because it does show better on a sizzle reel. And a lot of people, especially in this kind of YouTube, TikTok era, have that kind of visual draw or want to see a visual draw. So it's funny because the TikTok example I use all the time of the power of TikTok is actually Tapple. And that's an op game, right? So Tapple is a game that I had, like, I don't know, how old is it, Pat? Like 15 years ago I had Tapple? I don't know. When I first got
give or take.
It's like ancient history in terms of the game cycle, right? But then somebody like 2 years ago, I don't know, was it during the pandemic? They were playing Tapple, and all of a sudden, like a million impressions later, the op is like, I guess we got to print more of this game because it just went viral because it's something.
Yeah. Well, and that brings up a great point, right? In terms of picking these different mediums, is it depends on your product a little bit. So Tapple is the kind of game where in 20 seconds of watching people play it on TikTok, you understand all the rules. There's a category card, they're naming things from that category and pressing letters that the letter that matches the thing that they said for the category. And it kind of does what mobile game ads do, which is when you watch people play it and you're just relaxed at home, you feel like you could play it so much better, but suddenly when it's your turn and you're doing the thing, it's actually quite a bit harder with the stress of the timer and everything else and being put on the spot. But I think it has that, like, I understand it and I could do that. So I want to do that because I think I could do it better than this, mobile game ads always show somebody playing terribly. So you're like, give me that. I can do that better. But that doesn't work for every type of game, right? If you have a 2-hour long strategy game and you're trying to do a quick TikTok of like, this is how it works, it could be a mismatch, right? That whoever you're pitching it to is walking away going, I don't understand anything about what you just tried to communicate to me. It's maybe not the right format for that. Now, of course, we probably don't want a 40-minute video either, because at that point, like, we might as well just get on a call and do the full pitch meeting, or just send me the rule book. So there's a balance with those things. But another piece I wanted to touch on with pitch decks too is we see different formats of them, right? Sometimes we'll get one animated and audio and everything, and it's really well developed, all about one game. Other times we'll see pitch decks, particularly in an in-person pitch meeting, where an inventor will come with a deck of all of their games, right? And the key there, of course, is skip the ones that don't fit the publisher that you're meeting with. Have a focus of, I want to show you slides 1, 5, and 12, and go through. But it's really a great tool when you have that on an iPad or laptop or something with you. There's definitely been meetings I've been in where somebody's like, I want to show you these 3 slides, and I'm like, wait, what was that? Go back.
Yeah.
That got caught by the eye candy.
Yeah, and let's talk about that. Or we get through the 3 games they wanted to show really quickly. We have extra time. It's like, well, what else do you have? Like, maybe it's a fit for us, maybe it's not. Maybe I'll point you in the direction of another publisher. But it's nice to have all those tools as like just a very clean, like, here's a visual of the game, here's the stats, and you can talk about it. And when that's done well too, it can save you the setup time. Right?
Yes.
If you're going into a 30-minute meeting trying to show me 3 games, and each of those games takes 15 minutes to kind of set up enough pieces to explain it to me, we're going to run out of time and not get the point across. But having that pitch deck on a screen where you can say, okay, here's what the game would look like, and I can tell you what these components are and how they're utilized in the game, can be really powerful. So there's some ways to do that as like a multi-game deck as well.
Yeah, I really like that idea.
You've touched on one thing that I think a lot of designers don't think about when they're first getting into pitching, and that's that publishers will almost always say, what else do you have? Every pitch meeting I've ever been in, they've said, oh, what else do you have? And the first couple of times I was like, what? But I'm only here to pitch this one thing. And the thing we forget is that we're not there to pitch that one thing. We're to pitch ourselves and to show what else we've got. And if the relationship is working, they might be like, okay, this isn't the right game, but I want to work with you. So even if my sell sheets are pretty average, I make sure that I've got all of them with me just in case, because you never know. One of the other things that I've noticed that there's a lot of pressure about is the production value of not just your sell sheets, but your videos and everything else. And I think it's really important to remember that to get it on TikTok, it's literally you and your phone. And I think that's fine for a lot of these pitch videos, right? Am I wrong about that, Pat?
No, not at all. Like that, one of the things I like about TikTok as a tool is like the expectation for production is really low, right? It's just like, I'm in my car, I'm doing the thing, right? And obviously if you're doing a professional like pitch video to a publisher, you want a little more polish than that. But I can say after watching so many videos for like Cardboard Edison or Ion, like you see the full range, everything from shaky handheld phone camera, no script, off the cuff kind of a thing, to fully animated digital assets and things like that. For me, I try not to have that matter as much, right? Like when I'm not interviewing you to see how well you do video production. I'm trying to figure out the game, and is the game something that is either fits the criterion worthy of the award or fits what we're looking for at the op and the kind of games that we want to make. And sometimes the flashy stuff helps with that, and sometimes it detracts from it. So it can be a trap a little bit. I've commented kind of jokingly, like some folks spend a lot of time and energy making like an animated musical intro to their, like, for whatever their studio or brand is that they're designing behind. It's like, okay, in a Cardboard Edison scenario, you have a 3-minute video. That's the cap. And you've just spent 30 to 45 seconds on animated intro for your design studio. We haven't even gotten to the game yet.
That's too long.
That's a sunk cost fallacy in a lot of ways. It's like, I spent $500 on this in 8 hours, so I'm going to use it.
I mean, put it at the end if you need to put something like that. But damn, when you've only got 3 minutes.
Yeah.
Oof. I mean,
It
that production value thing is something that I found a huge barrier when I was first thinking about this, because when I asked people what's a sizzle reel, what's a pitch video, people would generally tell me the same thing for both of those, which I don't think is accurate. And secondly, they would say, oh, yeah, sizzle reel, that's kind of like a trailer for a movie. And I'm like, what? How am I going to do, like, in a world where, like, no, I can't do movies like about my game, and I've only got 3 minutes, and it's like a paper product. What? So I feel that pressure a lot to have it looking really, really good for these videos, and I feel like I'm not the only one, and that's a really risky thing to be out there for people thinking, oh, I have to make it perfect.
you don't.
Don't do that.
You have here's what you have to do. You have to clearly communicate the promise of your game and then show how it delivers on the promise. That's it. That's literally your pitch, right? And so can you do it fancy? Sure, you can do it fancy, but if you can't and you still do the other thing, if Pat really likes the promise and sees how your game delivers on it, he doesn't care. I'm putting words in your mouth, Pat, but I don't think you can.
I know. It's like,
no, it's a fair point, because, and I want to elaborate, like, for me, what the promise means is not you promising me something about the game. It's the game and what it is presenting as, this is the experience you're going to get.
Yes.
That's the promise. Like, if it's going to be a laugh out loud raucous party game, that's the promise, like that you're pitching to me, and I'm evaluating what you're showing as the mechanics and how it actually functions to assess, like, do I think I'm going to get that out of it?
Yeah.
If it's a cutthroat backstabby thing, am I going to get that experience? What I see with this, and kind of with what Kat was saying about sizzle versus pitch, like, we do sizzle videos for finished games, right? And we'll have a professional company that does animated graphics and everything, try to condense basically the box bottom of those games into 30 seconds to a minute of, I'm saying this high level action of, like, draft tiles while an animation is showing those tiles being drafted, add them to your board, and now they're going into the spaces, and all of that stuff is visually explained in a way that I'm not expecting out of a pitch video. Sometimes I think people take sizzle too much to be the movie, like, in a world type of thing. Yeah. And so this was a thing I commented on Facebook after Cardboard Edison, is there was a number of videos where I got 3 minutes of in a world.
Oh yeah, the lore drop, right?
And that or
footage and
marketing buzzwords for 3 minutes, so it's and it's easy to fall into that trap of, like, okay, I want to win this award, I want to highlight my game, so it's selling, right? And you get way too into the sales language of it. And really, I think, at least for me and my perspective as a publisher, I'm like, don't tell me about, like, the game is great, show me what you think makes the game great, and let me evaluate that. So if you spend 3 minutes saying, like, it's unique and original and tactical and interactive
unique
between
and original,
players,
and you say unique too many times, it's not unique anymore, guys. Just
or if you spend heaps of time talking about the lore, and by that it's not just, this isn't just RPGs and things like that, this is the setting of the game. So, like, if I'm just going to use BubbleNet as an example, if I spend 2 of my 3 minutes talking about whales and, like, what they do,
I mean, it's cool, and that is, like, really actually pretty cool stuff.
Your average humpback whale does blah 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 blah, and people are like, yeah, how do I play?
This is not a podcast, right? It's not a podcast.
Yeah, and I didn't understand that at first. I thought that I was supposed to give all of that context, and when I'm teaching the game, I will give you this much of that context, and then I'll give you some more of it here and some more of it here. But initially I thought, I have to tell you the whole thing because now you know why you're doing it. No, you're a whale. You and your buddies are trying to, create a spiral to push these fish in towards the middle so you can eat lots of them. Yeah. So this is how that works.
Yeah, done.
Boom.
Yeah.
So I think that's the kind of thing that I thought initially. I thought that I had to have, like, this camera motion going around and doing, like, and then having an actual animated whale coming up and those bubbles and fish. I was like, I don't know how to do this. And the game's not finished. How do I do this? No.
You don't need any of that. So I like what, Pat, you were saying about show, don't tell, right? We're not saying don't tell at all, but definitely show, right? Show more than you tell. So, in like media studies, if you've ever done any media studies course, you might have heard the saying like the medium is the message, right? Which is a very Canadian thing. It's a Canadian thing because the guy who said it was Canadian. Anyway, so we hear it all the time on these little Canadian minutes that happen on TV on the CBC. Anyway, it's really powerful though. It's a really important thing. Like when you have video, use video. When you have the option to use pictures, use pictures. Don't overload people with text. The average word rate, right? So when we're talking at about 150 words a minute, right? So think about how much more you can tell somebody with that picture, with that video, and not have to read or even type or write out 150 words. Just let the game show itself off, and you can highlight little things or explain what's happening in little bits with the words or the text or the voice, right? And it's the kind of thing where less words is more, I find, because you're going to drill down to the quintessential elements that you want a person like Pat to know, and you're not going to go off about things. And I know, so about lore drops and things like that, I have to tell you that very few people care as much about the lore as you do. As a creator of the lore, you care about it a lot. Nobody else cares at this point.
Not at this stage,
right?
No. Or
when that game gets
often
published,
ever,
maybe when that game gets published, if that game gets published, then people might start caring. So,
fan.
you know, like things like Magic the Gathering, which Pat is a lapsed player of, apparently. All that flavor text at the bottom, nobody cares about it until they do, until they like play it enough and they've mastered the game. And like, what is all this little flavor text? Where is Herloon compared to this? Who is Urza? And why does he have a mine? You know, and all that. And there are actually stories about this. There's all backstory lore about it, but they drip it out because 99% of people don't care. But for the 1 or 2% of people that do care, they really care, and they'll find out about it later, and that's okay. But definitely not in a pitch, right? Because you want to highlight what does the game do, not necessarily what's it about.
And I think that's actually talking about what it does and all of that sort of thing. I think that's quite a good segue for George's question from a little while ago there, because being able to talk about your game, like what state or level of development does it need to be in before you're actually showing it in your pitch deck? I try and avoid having anything that I still consider as heavily under development. But I've found out that actually a lot of people will bring something along, even if it's still pretty like new, just in case. And it depends on the publisher. What do you think, Pat?
Yeah, it depends a little bit. If we're only meeting about one game, right? That game needs to have been tested, developed, right? It can't be an idea. It can never really just be an idea. I get that question sometimes. It's like, can I pitch you my idea for a game with the expectation that like, because we have in-house developers and things, we're going to go and make that idea a reality for somebody. And that's just not, unfortunately, how it works.
What do you tell them when they say that though, Pat?
Basically that is like, you know, we have a full slate of product that we're already making. And, you know, they're pitching an idea, competing with somebody who's pitching a game that maybe they've been developing and testing for 1.5 or 2 years. I'm more likely to invest in that thing because it's real. Right. And, and I can see it. So, you know, if you're coming in to pitch one game to a publisher, that game should be tested. It should have gone through the paces of, you know, iterations, redesign, fixes, and be really a version that you're really proud of and feel great about. Now, if you're bringing a pitch deck and some backup things, you know, sometimes it's okay to have those like,
hey, while I have,
yeah, like we finished this. Hey, I'm really excited about this new thing I'm working on, and just be transparent, right? Like, we're literally looking very closely at a game for the op that's been in development maybe a month at this point, like from initial idea to where it is, because the core of that game hit when it needed to hit. Like the spark is there, the fun is there, the excitement is there. We're like, okay, there's some dev and balancing stuff around this, but the soul of it's there. And that can happen with party games too, where, you know, you have
quite quickly,
a very simple concept and it just smashes together really quickly. Now, if it's a 2-hour epic hobby game, you're like, I've been working on this for like couple weeks, it's probably not that well processed out yet. But yeah, having a few of those things in your back pocket of just said, by the way, I'm working on this. Is this something, if I developed it more, you might be interested to see? Like, I've had that pitch before. That doesn't bother me. But I wouldn't want that to be the whole meeting.
I'm pretty sure
And
I've
that
pitched
shouldn't
like
be
that
your
to you.
first approach.
Yeah.
You shouldn't go into any meeting with a publisher with your first approach being, yeah, hi. So I came up with this game idea a couple of weeks ago, and I made this prototype on some like note paper on my way to this meeting. No, don't do that. Like,
Yeah.
I've seen people who've gone like 2 pitch meetings with something, and their early pitch meetings, like their first or second or something, with something only slightly more developed than that. And I've just thought that's disrespectful at that point, and it's going to set a tone about you, like who you are and how much you value someone else's time. So that's a really good angle to look at it from as well. Like, do you think this is worth taking up the time of someone you want to spend hopefully a lot of time working with if they sign this game, or that you want to consider your other games in future?
Yeah.
Do you think this game is worth taking up their very busy schedule?
Erica and I have this thing that we're probably going to do it someday. I don't know. We'll make a video series on it, on like how pitching is like dating. And like, would you go to your, to a first date, not showing your best, right? And so that's kind of part of it there. So Pat, how far in development do you want something to be? I know part of that was already what George asked, but then I'm going to ask it again because I've read a couple people writing that, I've heard from other people that it should have full art. And it's like, okay, no, but I want to know from your perspective as a publisher, where do you expect, what line do you want drawn? Would you take art? And what's the problem with taking other people's art?
Would you take art? I know the answer.
I mean,
Gnome Hollow,
Yeah.
you did.
Yeah, so it depends, right? Like,
Yeah.
unfortunately, the
depends.
answer is broad, and it depends. With Gnome Hollow, the inventor was also the artist, and people had seen that art. That game had been tested widely at conventions. It had a level of interest behind it, and so we chose to keep that art. Now, did we keep it 100% as it was? No, we had our art director work closely with Ammon, who's the inventor, to tune up some of the things and make some adjustments and do some new box art and some elements like that, but to keep the soul of what he'd created and bring it over. T-Witches that we have coming out later this year was a designer-artist collaboration, right? So we had Manny Vega and Sandara Tang, and so we knew that was a package deal. The art wasn't done, but the idea was this artist came on board to do the art, which we then obviously paid for. So the downside of going out and creating your own art, if you're a talented artist and you can do it and you enjoy it, then by all means,
more power to you, right?
Yeah, if it's a fun part of the process. Now, the key is it can't be work avoidance for the development and playtesting, because for a lot of folks, like that's a really stressful part, to put your game in front of people and get that feedback and do that.
Do you feel called out?
Very called out.
I did this in the beginning too. I was like,
it's part of my process, but it is also part of my avoidance.
Yeah, like, it's more fun to shop for new, like, cool bits for your prototype than it is to get critical feedback from people to make the gameplay better. So
shut up, George.
Yeah. So that's a piece of it. So if you're spending countless hours developing art but not refining the gameplay, that's a problem. And then the other side of that is, if your art makes it harder for you to develop the gameplay, then you get wed to something that maybe should be changed, and is harder to change. I would never spend money on art, like hiring an artist to do it. There's always this temptation of, like, you want to see what the finished product would look like, so you go find an artist, because a publisher is going to have a vision. They might have a different theme that they want to put on the game, and they might not want to pay what you paid for that art. They might have in-house artists or folks that they work with where they get a better rate. For us, sometimes it's like, well, we want to put an IP on that, so we're going to go use IP art and do that
a different theme, or there's so much risk in putting that much investment. So for me, like, I will pitch with the art that I've done, but I own that art. Because
you did it.
And I'm just like, you know what? If you don't want to use it, that's totally cool, because I'll keep it. I'll do what I want with it, because that's how I feel about it.
Now we'll have
if you're someone who's
whales on fabric.
I mean, yeah, I do fabric design as well. I actually do use the designs for other things. But one of the things that I think a lot of people who do their own illustrations do, and I think that this is the trap, is that they get so personally, emotionally attached to these illustrations that the game doesn't work without their illustrations. And so they're not willing to negotiate because of that.
Mhm.
And that's a really risky trap to put yourself into, whether you've paid for the art or whether you've done the art, because part of being an experienced designer is listening to more experienced designers and their feedback, and that can be really painful and really difficult. And so the more things you've put in there that people are going to give you feedback on that might hurt, the more you're setting yourself up to go away with hurt feelings.
Yeah.
So if you put your art in there as well and they're like, I really don't like whales, like you just sort of be like, well, alrighty, cool. Can I show you my capybara game?
I will say though, if you're somebody who's planning to self-publish and you want to go through crowdfunding and do that route, at some point you're going to want to show people a game with art on it. But what I would advise is sort of follow a similar process to what we do. So when we're evaluating the visuals for a game, we're going to look at every competitive game that we think is a direct competitive thing, either because of the mechanics, the theme, like we're going up against these games. We want to make sure, especially thematically, our art style is different from other games. So it's not just, oh, this looks just like a clone of that thing. We want to make sure we stand out. But then our art directors will do like an artist brief. Like, it is these things. It shouldn't be those things. The style should be not too junior because that would miscommunicate what this game is, and those kinds of pieces. We might pull references from, more this style than that style to kind of hone in. I would play test that with your play testers first before you go out and hire an artist. Is like, I'm thinking this visual direction. This is what I'm kind of, and if they respond like, yeah, that's great, or like, ooh, that's way off the mark from what I was picturing as I played it. And then you can, when you have an artist, you can have them do rough sketches, show those rough sketches. Don't just go all in of like, I'm so eager to see the final box top that I'm going to spend $5,000 and do a really cool box top. And people are like, that's not it,
Yeah. Get like even mood boards that you can A/B test, right? So would this game suit this better, gothic, steampunky, dark, stuff, or this, which is like happy, fun fairies? I don't know the difference, but the game might be able to work with both. And you just want to see what fits the vibe, right? What passes the vibe check. And I think that's another thing that people get caught up in and fail to see that, your everything, if you have a really tight package of a game, everything kind of fits together, right? The art fits together with the mechanisms, fits together with the theme, fits together with the age, fits together with the name of the game and all those things, right? So like a product like Gnome Hollow, right, is like from top to bottom, quite literally, an exercise in product design, right? Where the art fits the name, fits the mechanism, fits the whole story of Gnome Hollow, and it's a really good product, right? It also happens to be a really good game. Two separate things, right?
But it's designed by someone who comes from a product design background as well, and you can see that.
Yeah,
and that's not a bad thing. That's a good thing.
That's
not all product designers though. So, yeah.
But it's important to keep in mind, and when you're pitching, this is the thing I hear from inventors all the time. Is like, well, my theme doesn't matter because I've been told publishers are just going to strip it off and put the theme on that they want, and I shouldn't be wed to my theme because I know they're just going to change it. I've even had pitches because of our IP background and things that we do at the app, where somebody comes in and they're like, here's 25 different themes you could put on my game. It could be X-Men, it could be Marvel, it could be Harry Potter, it could be Star Wars, it could be, SpongeBob. And I'm like, if it could be all of those things,
then it's
it may
none
not
of those
be
things.
any of those things, right?
Or at least represent it well enough, right?
Yeah. And if you've designed that whole
needs
package,
to still link in.
Yeah, where you're coming at the game and saying like, I'm bringing you a game that is themed around gnomes because the way I've designed this game, it would be hard to visualize it as something else. And I'll even get questions internally sometimes when I'm, taking the games I want to make and pitching them to senior management and saying like, this, I think this is going to be our big game next year. Sometimes they'll say, oh, could we do an IP on that? I'm like, no, this one is so well designed to be what it is.
Yeah.
And what it is doesn't mirror an existing IP. So we would have to break what it is to make it fit that. And I don't necessarily want to do that. But knowing that about your game and coming in with that as your pitch is like, where does your theme explain the mechanics for you? And
Yeah.
figuring out how, like, okay, because we're whitewater rafting, and now I'm going to explain a part of the game where the raft goes downstream. It's like, you could probably say less and show more of the boat moving down the stream or whatever's happening, where it'd be like, oh, because thematically I understand what's happening, mechanically I can just, there's sort of assumptions, especially that somebody experienced in a lot of hobby games is going to go, yeah, I get exactly what's happening there. Like, we're doing a
at the end of every round, we move everything forward one space down to the end of the river from the start of the river, right? That kind of stuff.
One of my favorite examples for talking about thematic integration and why it matters, and how it can be useful is one of the games that I designed. The discard pile is called the compost. And anyone who knows anything about gardening knows that putting things in the compost means that you're generally going to get things back out at some point, because compost can be used to cause new things to happen. And that's exactly how this discard pile works. It basically works as a compost in that game. And that's, for me, that's the kind of example that I think is really simple and useful. And I've seen a lot of other really good ones like that, where you can just instinctively tell, because of what it's called, how it's going to work, or because of how it works, how it integrates into the rest of the game. And those things, I think it would be heartbreaking if they got broken in order to fit into a theme. But there are times when something is simply an abstract game and it will fit with whatever theme you want to put on top, and that's fine. But yeah, I personally think really justifying the game with the theme is a very valid thing to do.
So Pat, I've heard from a couple publishers that they like to hear like what a designer's optimal vision for something would be, like when it's on the shelf. What would it look like? What do you see this in? What do you see the game looking like or being at the end of all of this? Does having that kind of solidified vision help you pitch, or help people pitch to you, do you think?
Yes. And I'm going to say yes, because it generally implies that they're thinking product as well as game, right? So they're visualizing an experience that people are going to have from the minute they open that box to setting up the game on the table and playing it. They've been thinking about like how the pieces might feel in hand, what kind of art is going to steer the process. They've probably named a lot of the components, intuitive things that help understand their function. So people aren't saying like, oh, I need 3 blue cubes. They're saying I need water resource or whatever it may be, right? They're trying to think through that user experience of the game to create an appealing product, because we have to do that, right? You can have a game that's fantastic with mediocre product design, and unless you have great marketing or get really lucky with word of mouth, it can get lost in the fray. And then you can have games that have fantastic product design and cool components, and everybody goes, I got to try that thing, and they're like, oh, it was all right, but it keeps selling because it just looks cool. It's toyetic.
It looks amazing. Yeah.
I think sometimes part of that question to be aware of, though, if you're being asked that by a publisher, is potentially gauging what you might be like to work with, and what your vision is and how attached to it you may be. So I've had, inventors sort of say, for me, this is the core, right? Like Fountains coming out later this year. When we were talking with Kedrick, he was like, for me, it's Fountains. Like, I don't want to change the theme of the game. I like that. And he's like, the tile's got to stack. It's got to have table presence and build these sort of 3-dimensional fountains. And we're like, obviously, like the whole thing is, we're not going to change any of that. And he was like, past that, like art style, whatever you guys want to do. He's like, I'm open to ideas and input. Sometimes you have other inventors who are like, it's got to be this. I want this artist. I want it to look this way. I want it to cost this much. We have to have metal coins, or, and they have pretty strict things. And it's like, sometimes that can be informative from the standpoint of like, oh, those are interesting ideas, and have your playtesters been, they've been telling you that repeatedly, and maybe that's what this game needs because it's the audience expectation. And sometimes it's a red flag of like, you've got a very clear vision of what you want this game to be that maybe realistically won't work within the financial models that we have to operate under, compared to, going through Kickstarter and not trying to make a profit. Just
Right.
like, I just want to get this thing out there and make it super deluxe. You know, and we're trying to figure out, is this going to be, you know, a lot of push and pull, because we want to be super collaborative with our inventors and have them in the process. And, you know, we'll send playtest feedback. They'll test what we're testing, you know, work through it. We want to be sharing artwork and sketches and getting them excited. So, you know, ultimately they come to a convention super excited about the finished product and they want to demo it and sign copies and do all that kind of a thing. And if we start feeling like it's going to be really adversarial, where, you know, we're going to have to make some tough calls and say, well, we're investing the money, so we get the final say, you know, we don't ever want to be in that position. And if at the start we sense some things of like, ooh, you are really tied to a particular vision. And I will say, like, I've had a pitch or two where somebody's like, I've been working on this game for the last 7.5 years. And I'm like, ooh, why is that? Why is this your first time pitching it? Yeah. You know, and you've, or has it been through many pitches with many publishers over 7.5 years, and the vision you have for the game maybe doesn't align with a product vision that we think can reach a broad enough audience to justify investing in this idea.
Mm-hmm. And for that reason, I'm out.
Yeah.
I mean, Pat, you know, the most important thing to me is the exact typeface that you use for my name on the cover of the box. I will not budge on this.
Unless it's Papyrus or Comic Sans.
Papyrus.
Yes.
And 45 point.
Love it.
So I don't know if you know this, Cat, but there are actual rules for some of those things for some people.
I know.
Not in our industry.
No, but I'm not attacking anyone with this one in particular, but I was just thinking that is exactly the kind of weird thing that my brain would get stuck on and be like, it has to be this typeface.
All green M&Ms or whatever, right?
It's got to be, yeah. Like some, you know, neurodivergent people can get stuck on things that are just like, why does that matter? And honestly, like, I bet you have to manage that with people sometimes, Pat. But often, if you just give them their green M&M, it can be the thing that sorts it out. Or if you give them their green M&Ms, then next time they're like, and also.
Maybe.
So.
Before we go on, I just want to say hi to the people who are watching out there in Meeple Syrup Land. Welcome to Alex. Hi, George. Hello, the op, whoever you are. Is it Ray? Is it Ray? It might be Ray. I don't know. Who would be on YouTube? Who would be on the op's YouTube channel right now?
It could be Ray. It could be Andrew.
All right. Andrew or Ray, if that even is your name. Welcome to the show. And anybody who has questions for Pat, we've got about 15 minutes left in the show. So please do type them into the chat. We'll get them asked and answered, hopefully. I mean, Pat's a smart guy, so you can ask him like anything. It'd be great.
I'll try. Yeah.
He'll try.
Do you have a favorite typeface, Pat? Does the op have a style guide in that sense? Like, is that one of the things? Now, this is actually a serious question that I was thinking about asking. So when you're looking at games and thinking about bringing them into the op portfolio, do you have a kind of, not exactly a style guide, but this fits us and this doesn't,
like a rubric,
explicit kind of thing where you can say to yourself, okay, when I go down this, like a rubric or something along those lines, like you do with style guides and things like that, when you're thinking about whether or not a product will fit your line? Do you have something like that? I'm not asking you to tell us what it is.
We do actually. So we have different product hubs right at the op. So David Blanchard is my counterpart on the Party Family Hub, and then I do the hobby games. And we have a third division, which is our co-brand games, which is existing games plus an IP, right? So nobody's pitching to that channel because it's existing things. For both David and I, we do have detailed wish lists. And one of the things we do, if you schedule a meeting with us at a convention to do a pitch, in the Calendly description for that meeting will be that wish list. So before you come meet with me, you'll have that full, the app is looking for this, and this. And then oftentimes I'll try to leave some time in a pitch meeting or conversation, whether it's virtual or in person, to kind of go through that and iterate that. So even if the game you're showing me is a pass, I want to make sure you leave that meeting knowing the next time we meet what I'm looking for, and can have a higher hit rate where it's like, hey, I think I made exactly the thing that you want. And there's even a couple sort of pie in the sky wish list things I keep on there of like design challenges for folks. The two current ones are a really great gateway game. Think, your typical Sagradas Azules, things like that, but that plays 2 to 8 or 2 to 10 and feels just as good at 2 as it does at 10.
That's
Two more caveats: can't be social deduction, can't be roll and write.
Oh, good.
Doesn't
Okay.
exist. Yes. It just doesn't exist really right now, and there's always a question we see in the community is like, 7 people are coming to game night. Do we split 4 and 3, or do we play party games? And it's like, boy, wouldn't you love to play a Wingspan type game with everybody? I'm very curious. You probably can't see it on the table behind me is Critter Kitchen.
I saw you comment on that today.
Mine just arrived.
Yeah,
it's like I can't wait to play this Saturday.
Yeah, I've got it set up and I've gone through the rules because I just want to dive people right into it. But it seems pretty approachable, and it came with 7 player boards in the Kickstarter version. So, if we have enough people, I'm going to try it at 7 and see how it goes, because I'm really intrigued by that opportunity. The other pie in the sky thing on my wish list is, going back to games that can be rethemed. When it comes to games that are about music, one of the things I've seen a lot is it's like a lot of them boil down to sort of set collection and recipe fulfillment, right? Like, I got the notes, or I got the parts of the song, and I put them together, and you could replace those notes with vegetables and the song with like a soup, right? And it would mechanically be the same. So what I would love to see is like, I want somebody to make Rock Band the tabletop game.
Yeah.
Right? Like, we get together around the table and we felt like we performed music as a group.
Do you know?
Are we about to have a pitch?
No. Well, yes, but not for me. Not for me. Do you know Jay Bell?
Yes, I actually talked to Jay at Gamma because somebody else said he had something
from Panda GM, right? But anyways, Jay has a game that did you talk to him then?
Yeah. Somebody told me at Gamma when I brought this up in a pitch meeting, they're like, Jay has a game that might fit that. And I saw Jay like an hour later in the hall at Gamma, and I was like, Jay, you got to show me this thing.
Did you see it?
I haven't seen it yet. No.
Oh, okay. So yeah, it's fun. He's probably changed it since I've last played it. No. It's
no. But I mean, because that means that you're still looking for a rock game that fits.
Oh. The big thing about it is like, he is a big fan of the band Lawrence. And so Lawrence also is a big fan of games. And his wife, Jay's wife, had like a backstage pass for a meet and greet with Lawrence. And she was talking about board games and stuff like that. And she said, "Oh, my husband's a board game designer. Maybe he could make you a game." And they said, "Yeah, sure." So this is what he's been trying to do for about a year now. So it's good. And then, speaking of interesting things that kind of are a confluence of J-Bell, this show, and Cardboard Edison, is that the game that J-Bell started designing on this show at a live jam that we did on Maple Syrup is one of the finalists, I guess, right? So that's pretty cool. And I think he showed that to you. I think he showed you Pipit at Unpub last year.
Yeah, I've definitely played it. So
the one with the dice and the corrugated board,
and the throwing the dice into
the one that he made on our game jam.
Yeah. See, this whole confluence of all things J-Bell, really. Yeah, cool. So back to pitching mediums. Are there any other things that you think people could use to pitch to you? Like, standing outside your bedroom with like a big ghetto blaster on their shoulders that is like a pitch song. Would that work, Pat?
No.
For the rock game.
So you're saying that I shouldn't come down to Atlanta with a big ghetto blaster and play?
You could combine them. You could have like 2 to 8 part harmonies.
I'll sing them all.
If it was you, Sen, I would allow it, but it's just if
not every
random folks started lining up in my driveway to pitch, that would be it would upset my dogs if nothing else.
Distressing.
How is the grooming thing going?
Oh, great! Our van should be here next week, so we'll be getting ready to
dog grooming.
Yeah,
mobile dog grooming.
Yeah, that's the next big thing in the ATL. Don't you know?
I don't know.
Apparently, the next big thing everywhere. It's Zoom and Grooming. It's a franchise business that my wife and I are investing in. So we're gonna have a a local mobile pet grooming thing, which is good for our 3 dogs, but also for other folks. So rather than dragging your dog to a salon and leaving them there all day to be groomed or whatever, the van comes right to your house, has all the equipment on board, grooms your dog one-on-one, gives them right back. So
Alex Cannon says there's an incredibly nerdy music game based on harmony called 451, which I picked up during my music degree. You can really mess people up by playing Stockhausen on them. Okay, interesting. So Alex has a music degree. Maybe he can make a music game.
There's a lot of crossover. Like as I brought up this idea, is the number of people who are game designers or gamers who are like, well, I play multiple instruments, or I'm really into music theory or those kinds of things.
Music maths.
Yeah, there's definitely an intersection there, and I think that's why it interests me so much. Obviously our normal wish list is pretty broad compared to, like, those are 2 very specific like challenges I put out there. But when you're talking about the normal wish list, and I think every publisher probably has this, whether they articulate it clearly or not, is sort of these player counts, roughly this play time, these types of themes. Maybe we don't want that thing right now. For us, it's like take that. Really mean-spirited games probably aren't us. 2 to 4 players, larger range is better. Gateway level, highly approachable themes for a broad audience. Price point probably around $40 for a finished product, which you don't have to cost your game and know all that. But if it's comparable to what's in other $40 games, you're probably in the wheelhouse. Those types of things. And when you're thinking about doing your pitch video and putting that together, or your sell sheet or your pitch deck, it's make sure you include that. Like I've gotten somewhere, I'm like, okay, is this, how many people does this play? What do you think the age range is on it? How
is
long
this a cooperative game or a competitive game?
I had one of those where it, like, read the rule book, read the pitch, the sell sheet, went through everything, and at the end we still couldn't tell because they didn't really describe the end game condition.
It was a semi co-op, don't you know?
Well, it's like the game ended and we're like, how do you score it though? Did we win? Did you win? Like they just, because they kind of just, I think, put it together a little bit too quickly, they missed that. But yeah, you want to hit those things, right? Like, and all of this comes back to whatever medium you're using. Imagine the publisher you're showing this content to is looking at a lot of content like this in between trying to do the things they have to do to support the games they've already signed and committed to. And
the laundry and the groceries and everything else, they're still people.
Yeah. So make it easy, right? Like make it really easy. Show it to people ahead of time and say, like, people who don't know about your game, like, does this give you a sense? And if they're like, you forgot to tell me like how it works, that's always a tough thing. And you get to the end, you're like, so how does it play? What do I do on a turn? Try to check those pieces to reduce the workload. So whether it's a pitch deck, a video, a sell sheet, interpretive dance, like you want to reduce the amount of time it takes for somebody to have that high level sense of your game. I don't need to know how all 500 of your unique cards in the game work. But I do need to know, like, structure. Like, the game plays over 4 rounds. Each round has 5 phases. Those 5 phases are draft tiles, add them to your tableau, move a meeple, like walk me through those high level steps. I'm like, okay, I get a gist of what I'm going to be doing here enough that I want to dive deeper into your rule book. But if I walk away from your video going, I still don't know, I'm going to still do the work and dive in and learn it, because for me, it's like, I want to find great games and I'll do the work to find them. But I'm also going to end up doing some coaching with that inventor to say, next time.
Yes.
Yeah.
And
yeah, tell me a little bit more, or show me a little bit more, right?
Yeah. And if it's, something like Cardboard Edison and you're submitting your 3-minute video, judges are going to be doing maybe 50 or more of those videos. And, I'm blocking out one part of an afternoon to do them back to back to back to back. And so I want to get through them efficiently, thoroughly, give good feedback, but also not have it be like, oh, okay, now I got to stop because that video didn't communicate anything. I've got to really dig through the rule book because I don't understand what I'm looking at. Maybe the rule book doesn't have any visuals yet, and I'm like really struggling to understand what the game is before I can tell you if the game is good. So just always be kind of in that mindset of like, how can I make this easy because psychologically, the easier it is, the easier it is to get excited because I'm not doing the work. I'm like, oh, I'm just focused on the fun and why this thing is cool.
Yeah. Very true. Very true. Very true.
Have you ever had someone pitch you with like something weird, like mime or interpretive dance or something like that? Like, have you ever
Speaking of
had a
interpretive
really
dance,
strange pitch? I'm really tempted to do that now. Would you like that, Pat? Would you like a fully mimed pitch with just no words?
if the game was about mime, maybe.
Right, like there's opportunity for creativity if it's relevant to the game, right? Like to be memorable.
Oh no! This is like a 2 to 4 player abstract game. I'm just not going to tell you anything. I'm going to mime the whole thing. Would you love that?
Remember, the medium is the message. So you're basically saying that this game has nothing to say.
Yeah.
So
I love how Pat's like, I don't know. Please don't make me answer.
No, I was going to say like 3 p.m. Sunday Gen Con when we're in the final hour of that show and we're all absolutely stir crazy from like working the long hours and being in back-to-back pitch meetings and events and things. It's like that would be the perfect time to just like have that happen and all of us to be like, well, that was a thing. That's just time to go to bed,
Yeah, you would talk about that pitch for decades, I think.
I mean, it's one way of leaving a mark.
Right?
Oh, we have a
question from Andrew Tatchka. I'm gonna mess this name up, but let's say Tatka. Okay, Andrew. Something Andrew struggled with is how much balancing or material questions should be handled before pitching, and how much is left to the development work that happens. Okay, that's a good question. So I'm gonna paraphrase this a little bit because I think he's asking, if this game maybe needs like a bunch of missions. How many missions do you need to pitch it?
Yeah, so there's a couple pieces to it, right? If it's content, it depends how quickly you can fill in the content, right? So if you're bringing me, a Gloomhaven level game, which is beyond the complexity, we would do it the op. But like if you're like, okay, I've got Gloomhaven, I've got all these systems, I've made mission 1, my vision is 300 missions. I'm going to say, okay, come back when you have like 200 of those missions done, because that's a huge lift for my dev team to take on and do that, right? And some publishers might be set up for that. We're really not. If it's a party game and you need content, like, okay, there's 500 cards. Think of like a Telestrations or a blank slate where you have all these, every round is based on a new card. If you've only got 10, then there's a pretty big lift for us to not only write the other 300 or 400, but also test and refine, because not every card is going to work well, right? Just because you put it down doesn't mean it's fun for that experience. Like Telestration is a great example. If the thing is too easy to draw, it never becomes funny because everybody can draw the thing. So we look at that level of lift that we're going to have to take on to finish the game. Now, if it's a case of like a game where the core loop is there, right? Like think of a gateway hobby game where like the main thing we're doing, the flow of a turn, is done and really fun, but the balancing of all of the directives on cards or tiles or things that you can draft in that process maybe isn't. We're much more likely to take something like that on and go, the fun is here. We're really excited about this, the core of this game and what it does. We'll help you polish out those rough edges. The other side of that is we've seen games where they're like, we've tested and balanced, everything is like gone through every iteration and it's perfect. Like everything is perfectly balanced. And we're like, right, but the core game loop just isn't that exciting. So even though, yes, it's developed, it's balanced, it's perfected, it is the best version of this thing it can be, the starting point wasn't quite there for us. So, that can kind of come into it, but we're always going to look at workload. We're going to look at how much more development do we think the thing needs? Can we take that on? How much custom art? That can be a deterrent too. You need 500 pieces of custom art, and those pieces
500 individual card illustrations.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, and all of those have to be characters with facial detail and things like that. We might just say it's just not feasible for us to produce that much art at the quality we want to make within the budget that we have for a game at that price point. Those kinds of things. There's a piece in there about material, which I'm not sure if I'm misinterpreting, but like physical componentry and things like that. We'll do a lot of that in our development process in-house. So we're always going to play test and develop anything that comes in just to make sure we really put it through the paces.
Mm-hmm.
While we're doing that, we're looking at like, ooh, we handle these pieces a lot and it'd feel better if they were wood or plastic. Can we upgrade those? You know, and we'll do a lot of that stuff in the background as we go through that process. So, you know, I don't expect people to come in with like, here's my cost sheet from Panda telling me what everything in my game would cost, because it's like, well, maybe we're working with Panda or maybe we're not. Maybe we have contracts with other factories. Maybe we get better pricing. And also, like, if you priced at 1,000 units, we might be printing at the op 10 or 15 on the first run. So all of that is going to look very different for us. And we can do that work very quickly. So that kind of stuff.
That being said, though, as a product designer, it is a very good idea to at least have some concept, because I've seen people saying, you know, oh, my game is really cheap to make. It's just got 500 dice in it. Dice are cheap. And I'm like, no. Or just understanding how many cards are in a sheet.
Yeah.
You know, if you're just deciding how many cards you want to make, how many cards are in a sheet? Well, you know, some sheets there are X number and some sheets there are X number, but it's a good idea to know. You know, if you look at your average deck of 52 cards, it's got 54 cards in it.
Yeah, I don't think there's anything necessarily wrong with looking at, say, the Panda GM cost estimator. It's just more a question of like, don't get stuck
but
on
don't
that.
pitch that. Yeah.
Have an understanding of what this is going to cost, but
Yeah.
you know, don't use that as like leverage or like say, no, you're wrong, Pat. Like, that'd be bad. Don't do that. So Andrew was talking about cardboard stock versus like plastic mold or something for whatever he's making.
That
right?
kind of material.
I see. Yeah.
No, that's not really your job.
Yeah, that
No.
if you're not doing the actual design of the whole product and the package and all that kind of stuff, you don't need to worry about that. The team at a publisher will take care of that. Yeah, so Alex, you're right. That is definitely how I work. I don't make more than the first few types of things until there is some interest, but I also typically have interest before I pitch anyway. I do it backwards.
And that's often with an IP, right?
Yeah.
So you're telling a story and you're showing how the story will look, and people are already familiar with the context.
Yeah, and we've already like storyboarded where certain pieces will go. We just haven't made the mission there. And sometimes getting the key points of a story, like, so if we're doing like, I don't know, Star Wars, let's say we're doing a Star Wars story, you know, which parts do we want to show? You know, what movie is this showing? Is it the whole arc of it? Is it one event in it? What are we doing? And so, yeah, a lot of times with things that have chapters or missions, we'll do like the start, middle, and end of a 7-part or 8-part story, 10-part story. That's still not bad, because that's like 30 to 40% of it. But if we said we want like Pat said 300 missions and we came with like 10, that would be not feasible. Well, it's feasible, but it's not a good look. How about that? It's not a good look, right?
It's hard for a publisher to commit when they've only seen a small percentage of the thing. And when you think about like campaign games and things, the power creep, right, as your characters develop and new stuff comes in and the complexity ramps and all those things happen over the course of the game. If you've only done missions 1 and 2, which are probably the simplest version of your game, and don't have that clear vision for mission 50 where it ends,
have you accounted for that power creep with the monsters, the levels?
So would you do like mission 1, 2, 5, 12, and 50?
Yep, that's what we do.
Okay, yeah.
Beginning, end, and a couple in the middle, right?
Yeah. And have an outline for sort of where things are going to end up for that. And then, you know, for me, I would probably want to hear, okay, if I'm interested in this, how long do you need to finish it, right? Because there's a difference between coming in with a plan and saying, you know, this is where I've gone because I want to get a read from publishers before I do too much of it, in case they have input and things that they want to see. I can complete the rest of this content, you know, 4 months of writing and a year of playtesting or whatever it is you need. Like, be realistic. Don't you know, sell
do not make promises you cannot keep.
Yeah, right. And be open about that. But you know, if the expectation is kind of going back to that, I have an idea for a game. It's like, well, I've kind of outlined mission 1. You guys can take it from here, right? Then most publishers are just going to pass because they've got other priorities. And it's like, oh, to take on and embrace and develop your dream for you is a big ask. Now, maybe there's a rare case where somebody falls in love with that vision and wants to do that. But for the most part, I would expect that there would be pushback of like, we like where you're going.
Show us.
Go finish this.
Yeah.
It's a bit like pitching a book idea. You do need to have some indication of what's going to happen, even if you yourself don't actually know how it's ending.
Yeah,
some indication of the arc.
So for
and
things like so for things like leveling up and things like that, if you have a system of how that leveling up works for your characters, and you have the general, like if you have, so in a lot of games that I make, I'll have like tiered output for per mission. Like each mission you should get 3 to 5 experience points, on average 4, therefore by level 17 you'll have this many experience points, and I'll have a structure that shows how those points will be spent or could be spent. I don't have to make the mission to show that, right? So there's other ways to do it, but we have a formula. It's not formulaic, but we have a formula of how experience is given across missions, right? So there's ways to do it without building all the content. Again, because like Pat says, there may be an IP that gets attached. There may be direction from the publishers. They may hire a writer to start writing with you. They may do lots of stuff. So that's probably why I do like to protect my time. It's true. As a freelancer, when you work for multiple companies, you're making multiple games all the time. It's very different than focusing on one game. And, the other thing is that I don't like undoing work that I've done. So if a publisher, and I know publishers change lots of stuff, they don't always, but a lot of them will, then I don't want to have to undo something that I've built already. So I'll build this, like the skeletal framework that has enough meat on the bones to show the game, and I'll build the systems, but I just maybe won't do the creative storytelling parts of it, right? Like in this one, and I'll do that in the storyboarding too. Like mission 7 is, here's the brief of it, but there's 7 monsters that you fight. This is what they'll probably look like. There's a puzzle in the middle of it, and bam, there you go. And then Pat knows that that's what we're doing in that mission. Mission 8, those same monsters, but they've been reincarnated, and now they're more powerful, and all these things. Oh, hi, Matt Paquette. Matt Paquette, I have a question for you. Matt Paquette, will you come on the show and tell us about like art direction someday, and what art directors like, how they brief people? Because Pat was giving an example, but you're an art director and he's not. So fair, right, Pat? Yeah. So Matt, if you want to come on the show sometime to talk about art direction, that'd be super awesome. Anyway, so yeah, lots of good questions, everybody. I'm glad that you are asking. I know we started off and nobody's talking, but there's like 10, 12 people here. It's like, why are you guys asking questions? Pat's the man. He's got answers. Ask him questions. Matt Paquette said anytime, so we'll have to schedule.
How about
him in
next
there.
week, Matt? Because the person we did have scheduled can't come. Are you free next week?
Are you free next Wednesday, Matt? Paquette.com. That's his website, by the way. And you did say anytime. So you did say anytime. I just say we schedule them and then make
I'm waiting for the anytime except next Wednesday.
Pat will bring donuts.
Virtual donuts.
Virtual donuts. Cool. Well, you know what? I do have to run. I actually have another meeting with Erica because we're doing Ludology live at Breakout. So we're recording 2 episodes of Ludology on Saturday morning, and AMA, and then I don't know what else. So we have to plan it right now because I don't know. We're busy people. So I do have to run. Pat, loved having you here. It was a lovely, lovely show. Thanks everybody for the questions. I think hopefully you guys got a little bit more insight into what people in Pat's position need from you to assess your pitch, right? So Pat, if, in a nutshell, if you like top 3 things, what do you want to see on a pitch? Anything, pitch deck, pitch sheet, pitch video, pitch reel, whatever you want to call it. What do you want to see?
Stats, and by stats I mean player count, play time, components, those basic things you would see on a box bottom that kind of outline what this thing is. I want to see a high level overview of like, how does the thing play? Don't get into the weeds of every rule and corner case, just like, what is your rulebook's outline? Kind of articulate that to me and very briefly, so I get a sense of what it is, and a little bit of the flavor of the theme with that, but I don't need all the lore. And then with that, in addition to teaching the game sort of at that high level, as you're doing that, have an emphasis on what is that hook within that experience, right? Like, as I said earlier, like be wary of too much over like pushy sales language, but when you have that thing that what makes your game special, don't, my game is super unique, but as you're describing the thing that makes it unique, like highlight experientially what that is. So it's not just a mechanical rule,
Yes.
but it's like you do this thing which creates this experience for the players that everybody loves. And
Yeah.
if you can articulate those things succinctly, you have a really good pitch.
As this capybara, you get to.
Yes.
Yeah. What are you doing as the character, right? What are you experiencing as a player? Two separate things, but talk about them, right? Very cool. Everybody, we'll see you next week. Maple Syrup Show with Matt Paquette. All right. Thanks so much, Pat. We'll see you guys all later. Good night.